All right, Eric, you're alive.
All right. Good evening, everyone who's joining us. I'm Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning, the City of Annapolis Planning and Zoning Department. I'm joined by our comprehensive planner, Casey Ortiz, and we have our summer intern, Alad Nichols Kaufman, St. John's College here. Great to be with you. This is just the beginning of our rollout of the Annapolis Head 2040 Comprehensive Plan. It's something that we've been working on for over 3 years, started before the COVID-19 pandemic. And well, that set us back a bit. We stayed the course, and I'm really excited to share this plan with you. It's something we do every 10 years. We're required by the state to do a comprehensive plan just after the census data is released. And every time we do a comprehensive plan, it should be reflective of the moment we're living in, and this plan is no different. This is the beginning of a series of events that we're going to do to share the plan and get comments on what's in this draft. We'd love to hear folks' positive comments and things that might be missing from the plan. This is just the agenda for tonight's event. We're going to talk about essentially what is the comprehensive plan, why it matters. I want to share how to participate in a review of the draft plan. And I'm going to give you an overview of what's in the plan, just highlights, really. We really want you to look at the plan yourself. It's quite a bit of detail in it, and explore what might be interesting to you. I should say this presentation is designed to be a general overview of the comprehensive plan. It doesn't have a specific focus on any particular part of the plan. The plan covers a wide range of topics. We're going to be doing another sort of webinar presentation next Thursday at the same time, 6 p.m., same format. And then we're going to be doing a series of in-person events in mid-July. And I'll share the schedule of those shortly. And those are at different venues across the city, the 2 public libraries, Pitt Moyer Recreation Center, and Mount Olive AME Church and Parole. There'll be more presentations to boards and commissions, to civic associations, and we are available for any requests that might come our way to share this plan and give a prioritized view as it might relate to if you're representing a group in the city, a neighborhood group or a particular interest group. So we did think of a few questions that we've been getting, and we wanted to kind of go through some of these that might answer some of your questions right off. So just have a few here. How long is the draft Annapolis Head 2040 document open for review? We have a 90-day public comment period. It started this past Thursday when we released the plan at the Planning Commission's regular meeting on June 15th. We're going all the way through mid-September with this public comment period. We know people go away for the summer, and everything really can be done online, but we want to be sensitive to people's schedules. We want to provide enough ample opportunity for people to review this plan. It's a big document, and we think that'll be adequate time. Now, the state requires only 60-day public comment period, so we wanted to go beyond that and make sure we didn't end it in mid-August. Will there be chances to learn about more chances to learn about Annapolis Ahead? Yes, absolutely. We have this dedicated website, AnnapolisAhead2040.com, which has everything you need to know about this plan, where you can read the document. It's broken up into the chapters. Every chapter has a survey. I want to thank Casey especially for working on that website. He worked with our information technology department here at the city, Sean Wampler, in particular, and Josh, and communications department, Ina Young, Mitchell Stevenson. So thank you all for your help in putting this website together. How can I give feedback? Well, the best way is to go to that website and go to the individual chapter tabs. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, where we have surveys for each chapter, so we can keep our comments associated with the chapter that they're related to. But you can also send comments directly to Casey at csortiz@annapolis.gov, or you can come to one of our in-person events coming up and just submit them there. Will there be outreach for Spanish-speaking residents? Suppose we should have had this in Spanish, but yes, we're working on that, and we're going to provide some information on the website soon. We're working with the mayor's office, Hispanic community liaisons on that. So hope to share information soon. Are you planning to meet with any civic associations, HOAs, neighborhood groups, etc.? Yes, absolutely. We've been doing that throughout the whole planning process, but now it's more important than ever to be able to share what's actually in the plan. After hearing from these groups over the last few years, we've already reached out to many of them, essentially every group that we had contact information for. If you represent a group or involved with a group of some kind, please be in touch, and we'll be happy to provide a tailored presentation. And then finally, what happens to the draft plan after the 90-day review period ends? Well, we're going to be gathering all the comments into a comment log. This is something we did back in summer of 2021 when we released the preliminary goals, draft goals, recommended actions, performance measures. So we're going to be adding to that. And those were actually very helpful in tailoring what is in this plan. So we're going to respond to those questions, and we're going to give that material to the Planning Commission, who will use the comments to make a recommendation of the plan to the City Council, which will begin an adoption process, which could take several months as the City Council gets into the comprehensive plan and has their own questions and comments. That kind of leads into the overall schedule. So here we are in mid-June. We've started this 90-day comment period. I should say it began with the Planning Commission's meeting, a public hearing essentially opened last Thursday. That public hearing will remain open throughout the summer into the fall. Every Planning Commission meeting will have this on the agenda, so folks can submit testimony through the city's website to the Planning Commission. You can deliver that live or in just written format. We're going to be doing all this other outreach during that time, you can see here. And then in September, the goal is to be able to deliver a plan, perhaps with some recommendations for how it could be enhanced to the City Council, who will then start their own adoption process. And down here, this is just acknowledging that there's a few other planning studies that have been sort of folded into the comprehensive plan that are more specific, covering various topics. Some of you listening tonight may have been involved in some of these plans as well. They're all very important to the city. We wanted to acknowledge them in this comprehensive plan. So you may be wondering why Planning Commission has been mentioned so many times already. Well, state of Maryland is very specific about comprehensive plans and how we're supposed to be doing them, how we're supposed to be conducting the process. They're very clear that the Planning Commission should be leading this process with city staff, who typically aid the Planning Commission. And so it's unusual. I mean, it doesn't begin with City Council, although City Council has to adopt the plan ultimately. And we've had City Council engaged in this process from the beginning as well. But Planning Commission is really expected to lead this rollout, and that's the way we're doing it. They have to deliver this plan to the city council. So this is the website link again, AnnapolisAhead2040.com. I suppose if you remember one thing from this evening, it's this website, because going to this website will allow you to review the plan, and it'll first take you to the city's website, to this page here, which has been our Annapolis Ahead 2040 website from the beginning of the process that we've been updating along the way. We've been logging these presentations as we go. You can see some on the right sidebar here, including the most recent presentation, the Planning Commission. And then you see this very prominent button, Review the Draft Plan. If you click on that, it'll take you to this new, fresh, dedicated website specifically for the review period of the comprehensive plan, the draft. We've made it so that you can click on this gray button right away to take you to the full document, which you can download, you can print, you can share it. We have some videos. They feature me, for better or worse. But in the one on the left, I kind of give an overview. I'm not going to go through them tonight, but I give an overview of the comprehensive plan process. And in the one on the right, you can see it says walkable places. That's one of a few videos that we're going to roll out that just highlight some key themes of this comprehensive plan that we really want to promote, that I think make this comprehensive plan different from past plans. So this one talks about walkable places. Maybe the one thing that we found everybody can agree on, they want to be able to walk to more places in the city. There's going to be one on just mobility in general, and there's going to be one on future land use plan. In the coming weeks, we'll roll those out. And I just want to step us away from the PowerPoint for a moment and just show you how this website, this Annapolis Ahead 2040 website, is organized, because that's really important and a lot of work went into it. You can see it's broken up into various chapters that just align with the table of contents for the plan, which I'm going to share in a second. These three sections, the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city, those are really important to the structure of the plan. Those are kind of our city visions, and they encapsulate the various chapters. Many of these chapters are required by the state of Maryland to be included in a comprehensive plan, no matter what type of town or county is producing that plan. Arts and culture is a chapter that I'm very proud to say is specific to Annapolis, and that the state does not require an arts and culture chapter. We are a cultural city. We've been that way for 400 years. This is the first time we've had a dedicated arts and culture chapter in a comprehensive plan. Development regulations is essentially how we implement this plan. Much of it relies on having clear development regulations. Areas of critical state concern is a required chapter. It's very brief, but it really talks about what can we do to align the city for state funding through a variety of programs that the state offers. We summarize all of the goals and actions into charts at the end. It's called our recommended action matrix. And then we have an appendix, which has links to all these other planning studies that we've been doing along the way that cover specific topics. At the bottom, you can see our events coming up. We're here on the 22nd of June. Next week on the 29th, we'll have another one of these webinars. The day before, we're going to be at the Annapolis Environmental Commission talking about the environmental goals and recommended actions in the plan. Go into July. you can see on the 6th, we'll have our next Planning Commission meeting, so it'll be on the agenda for that. On the 11th, we have an event at Pitt Moyer. On the 17th, can't see it here, but Mount Olive. On the 18th, Michael Bush Library on West Street. And then actually, I think on the 12th, we have to add this. We recently confirmed on the 12th, we have the event at the Hillsmere, the Eastport Annapolis Neck Library. So we'll add that. But we'll be adding events to this calendar as we go along. And I'll get back to the presentation now. So at this point, I want to go through kind of highlights of the plan before we open it up to questions. I'll try to be brief, which is always a challenge, particularly when you're talking about a 400-page comprehensive plan. But here's the structure. It's really reflects what you just saw on the website, the different city visions that provide an organizing structure for the plan: the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city. You can see in the appendices all of the various other plans that we've put together, some of which were really essential for this comprehensive plan, such as the demographic and market analysis. That really captures who are we as a city today, what are our needs kind of socially and economically. The fiscal impact study looked at how can we, where do we stand in terms of being able to provide the same level of community services in the next 20 years, anticipating the growth that we will have. And some of these were task forces that coincided with the comprehensive plan that made recommendations which we included in this comprehensive plan that dealt with housing affordability, the maritime industry, Forest Drive. We were very conscious to include key recommendations from those task force reports. So starting in to the beginning, the introduction, I won't go through too much of this, but I just want to highlight that we have these foundational themes of the plan: equity, health, resilience. These are themes that are very much of the moment. They're things that I think differentiate this plan from past plans. They are themes that acknowledge we've been through COVID. We are intensely aware of equity deficiencies in the city that have been historically guiding our city, sort of structural inequality in the city. I think following the murder of George Floyd, cities everywhere across the country changed the way they do policymaking, the way we invest. It's just been incredible raising of awareness of how to better allocate resources in the city. When we talk about health, the basic idea here is we can design a city that improves our health, or we can design a city that makes our health worse. We want a city that improves our health. And that really begins with our mobility network and how we get around in our environment. And then resilience, it's very specific to both environmental resilience and social resilience. Essentially, we're grappling with climate change. We're a city on the front lines of rising sea levels. A lot of our city's work is aimed at addressing that. But then from a social resilience perspective, we're interested in how to make communities more adaptable to challenges in the future, and be conscious of communities that are less equipped to be resilient today and need more investment. So you're going to find these themes woven throughout the entire plan. And you're also going to find a lot of images. I want to highlight this image, images that speak to the city today. They're of the last year or two. This one of the first Juneteenth parade last year did not exist. That parade did not exist. That holiday did not exist as an official city holiday 10 years ago when we last did our comprehensive plan. Again, the structure, I won't really go through this, but we have plan principles that align with each of these 3 sections of the plan. And these 2, they guide every goal and recommendation in the plan. So you can kind of see these plan principles, a little bit of like an executive summary, this introduction, in terms of giving you a sense of what is in the rest of the plan. Important that this plan is something that everybody is going to use. It's not just for planning staff. It's not just for elected officials. It's really for people who may just be a resident, renter, a homeowner, somebody who owns property, may own a business, somebody who's looking to invest in the city, or an institution that is very much part of the fabric here. We want this plan to be accessible to all of those parties, and that was really important in writing this and trying to be conscious of that. Plan process really just speaks to how we've done this process, and the impacts of COVID were formidable. Community participation. I'm really proud of the amount of outreach that went into this process, both before COVID, during COVID, after COVID. We pivoted in a number of ways to try to reach communities across the city using a whole variety of technologies and strategies. And we met with boards and commissions, city council, civic associations. We had a number of surveys over different topics. I do want to highlight the boards and commissions in particular, because those are volunteer bodies. We have about 30 of them in the city. They're comprised of very engaged citizens who have specific knowledge, in many cases, of the topics that are in this comprehensive plan. So we engage those boards and commissions extensively throughout this process. And then the task forces that I mentioned that coincided with the process, we really leveraged the outcomes of those task force reports. You can't talk about the demographics of the city without acknowledging COVID, of course, and how it highlighted inequities in the city and challenges of certain communities to deal with an event such as that. It also showed a spirit of the city in marshaling our resources to get through it. Here you can see a familiar scene from Pip Moyer, which became really the most important site for the city's efforts to deal with COVID, I think. Social vulnerability is what we've used to determine the communities, really to give some grounding to which communities need some additional help. You know, that over time, the city has not allocated resources equitably. Today, we have some communities that are better off than others. And what we found is we use the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control's social vulnerability matrix to highlight, essentially do the data on where are our socially vulnerable communities. So people who know Annapolis, you may not be surprised to see some of these communities come up as more socially vulnerable than others. The Clay Street community in particular, on College Creek, areas along Forest Drive. This type of social vulnerability data is used throughout the comprehensive plan as a base for understanding where is our public transit network, where are our parks, where is our water access, public water access, understanding how that relates to socially vulnerable communities can help us change the way we invest across the city. So this is probably the most important thing in the demographic trends chapter. Again, to thriving city, you can see municipal growth, land use, and housing are the three chapters in this section. Municipal growth is a big, broad term. It's much more than just thinking of growth as population. It's it's qualitative as well. What kinds of businesses do we want to grow in the city, attract, or what type of development do we want to see? This image here is of new infill development on Annapolis Street in West Annapolis. It fits very well into its existing context. It's a mixed use development, meaning it has different uses on the ground floor, and the upper it has retail on the ground floor and apartments above. This is a model for the kind of development we would like to see more of in the city, that puts residents closer to conveniences and allows them to walk to places. It's something that I think we can do more of across the city, and there's a history of that in Annapolis for sure, particularly in the downtown and Eastport communities. We do project growth in this comprehensive plan. We look at numbers for the state and the region provide us with naturally occurring household growth, since what is the size of a family we can anticipate over the next 20 years. But then we also look at how many more people might be moving here beyond just the natural growth of the city from people being born here. And we look at a few different trends. We look at, what's the percentage of the county we've been over time in Annapolis. We look at the trend of growth over the last 20 years. We look at some projections based on the development we know about today and the developable areas that we're aware of. And I can say that we're going to be growing very modestly over the next 20 years. It's just a fact that we're not expanding as a city outward. So we don't really have too many places to grow to. We can really just use our land more efficiently, and that's really a central theme of this comprehensive plan. But when we talk about economic growth, these are the four primary themes. We're not a big city. We're not a city that's going to be attracting, Fortune 500 companies or, major startups that are going to need to expand their workforce into the hundreds. But we have various niche industries here that we want to invest in. Tourism, of course, is a big one. The maritime industry, the cultural economy is broad. It includes arts and culture, it includes events and creative producers in the commercial world or arts. Inclusive opportunities simply represents being more forward about making it easier to open a business in this city for somebody who has not done that before, particularly for minority business owners and people who've been shut out of opportunities in the past. And that's really a guiding principle, I think, for us as a city. As we get into land use, the big central exhibit for this chapter is this future land use map on the right. It's a guiding exhibit for the whole comprehensive plan. And typically most comprehensive plans put a lot of weight onto the future land use map. It looks at every property parcel in the city and says, what is the highest and best use of that parcel? What do we want it to be over time? And we make determinations about, in regard to proximity to waterways, to commercial transportation corridors, to existing institutional areas such as the Navy's facilities or the state's facilities downtown. The big changes with this future land use map versus the one you would have seen in the last comprehensive plan is all this green. It's the neon green areas are what we're calling environmental enhancement areas. These are places that have been here, but they've been kind of embedded within other land use categories, not really acknowledged. We wanted to bring those out and be aware of them, that a lot of them aren't pieces of land that could be easily developed, or we wouldn't want to develop them because they're along creeks or in other sensitive areas. But being aware of where they are and being strategic about how we can improve these environmental enhancement areas is really important, and they add value to adjacent properties. We have a lot of emphasis in this plan about connecting these green areas as greenways. In fact, we have a greenways map that is included in several chapters. The other theme is all the red, and this is our mixed use designation. We've had mixed use in previous future land use maps, other comprehensive plans, but we have far more in this comprehensive plan. And the idea is that we have a number of properties in the city that are not functioning as well as they could be. They're not providing the kind of public benefits they could be. It might be a sea of parking that's underutilized, or next to a waterway. It could be there's a single, a strip mall, just a single use strip mall that could accommodate some apartments above. There's a range of things we could be doing with these sites to amplify their value to the city. And you can see most of them are along major transportation corridors: Forest Drive, West Street, Bay Ridge Avenue. So you can think about these places as places where we want to guide development. In the last comprehensive plan, there were these 4 focus areas. They were called opportunity areas. The difference with this plan is we're kind of focusing on these specific parcels that make more sense as infill redevelopment opportunities. And we provide guidance for what would make a good development on these sites. This is a kind of a framework for what we want to be thinking about as these mixed use properties might redevelop. This is a guide for decision makers and planning commission, city council, staff, the property owners or developers. These are the things that should matter to a redevelopment. And you can see this image on the right of the building at Westgate Circle, that it's not something that could be built anywhere in the city. It's very specific to this circle, but it really achieves many of the performance standards on this page. And a smaller building could do the same in a different context. Infill redevelopment is really what underscores this emphasis on mixed use and highlighting the number of properties that are appropriate for infill redevelopment. And this also has some key standards to what makes for a good infill redevelopment opportunity. Highlighting the Spa Road, former Public Works site on Spa Road here as a perfect example of something that could be better utilized and likely will be in the next 10 years. We actually identify about a dozen of these key infill opportunities across the city and really try to provide some guidance to property owners, developers, communities adjacent to these properties who might be thinking about what should happen in these locations. We don't go so far as to design them. That really needs to be a more thorough process involving the communities. But we do want to get ahead of some of these projects and provide some guidance. I'm not going to share what we say. You have to look at the plan to find out, but we have some bullet points for each of these properties for what would make sense and what needs to be front and center as they might transition. And this is from the development regulations chapter, but I want to just highlight that a lot of what we recommend in the comprehensive plan needs to have development regulation changes to follow. So in other words, our comprehensive plan sets the vision, but we need our city's development code to follow that. And we will be looking for zoning changes after this comprehensive plan is adopted. And a big one is to focus on what's called form-based code. And it's essentially a way to guide new development that puts a big emphasis on the character of the new development, the look of it, the architecture, to ensure that it's reflective of its adjacent context. You can see this diagram here where you have conventional zoning is very simplistic. Zoning with design guidelines provides a little bit more direction on what the architecture should look like. But then form-based codes provide even greater guidance on what we can expect to see. And I'd say our current zoning code is somewhere in between conventional zoning and zoning design guidelines, with a few areas like the historic district being very close to a kind of form-based code where we can be very certain what's going to happen in the historic district. But zoning is, we do have a glossary in our comprehensive plan, and Alad worked quite a bit on that. Zoning is one of those aspects of development. It is sort of the major part of development regulations that guides much of what can and can't happen in the city. So looking strategically at our zoning code and how it can be better utilized is going to be a really important outcome of this process. And you can see on the right, our zoning map really shows this kind of history of piecemeal decisions across the city that don't really convey a larger vision. There's a few exceptions to that. This is the downtown area with its conservation zones and the maritime zones along some of our waterfront areas and the mixed use zone along Inner West Street. But by and large, we've created a very fragmented city. Moving forward, we want our zoning map to reflect the future land use map, be much more clear in terms of what we want out of our future development. And this kind of gives a good example. On the bottom, you can see the zoning districts for the West Street commercial area. It looks like a kind of puzzle. It's hard to figure out like why some of these lines are drawn the way they are. And decisions were made over time, I'm sure based on a certain rationale. As part of our comprehensive planning, we did a West Annapolis master plan in 2021 that tried to redraw those zoning districts based on kind of a form-based code logic, where the zoning districts are based on existing assets. So the established residential neighborhood and the Annapolis Street as the kind of village main street for that area, Raoul Boulevard as the major corridor leading into downtown, the importance of the shopping center as that kind of village square, and then how do you transition from the smaller scale Annapolis Street to the larger scale Raoul Boulevard? You have a transition zone. And so it's just a much more intuitive way of organizing this area into these new districts. This is a kind of a conceptual zoning framework that we think could apply to other areas of the city. The Creekshed framework is another idea that's really signature to this plan. We think there's value in, as we do smaller area plans moving forward, to think about them as Creekshed plans, as rather than looking at a single corridor or a specific neighborhood, think about the neighborhoods that contribute to a particular creek shed, knowing that all of our land use decisions have impacts on our waterways, which are the source of our culture, our economy. So much of what makes Annapolis is based on our waterways, and everything really should be guided to creating a healthier system, ecological system for the city. So, as we move forward, we're going to be looking at doing small area planning based along the creek sheds. And this diagram here, it's really focused on, it's actually a snippet from a plan that was done in Ellicott City after their catastrophic floods, I think in 2019. They did a comprehensive plan for the city that was essentially based on their watershed. And that's kind of the model here. Okay, I'm going to kind of quicken the pace. The land use chapter is really the most important chapter of the whole comprehensive plan, so I focused a lot on it. But housing is intimately related to land use. We have an acute housing shortage in the city. It's more expensive than ever before to live in Annapolis. People are driving from farther and farther away to work here, which adds congestion to our roadways. It's unhealthy, adds pollution to our environment. The more we can do to make it easier for people to live in the city, closer to where they work, the better off we'll be. And so the housing chapter goes into great detail about the range of housing types that we should have in the city to make the city accessible to the range of people that should live here. This diagram on the upper right is kind of what we call a housing bridge. It kind of shows, based on your income, what type of housing options are available. And we want to have all of these types covered. We don't today. What's called the missing middle housing, this light blue, is essentially what has historically been accessible to a middle income population. We have less and less of that every day in the city. See the diagram on the right. It also aligns with what I call light density, duplexes, triplexes, maybe four apartment homes. These historically have been part of the fabric of the city in a big way. Today, very little of that is allowed by our current zoning code. It doesn't make sense. You can see in yellow on this map all the residentially zoned areas that do not allow 2 or more dwelling units, just a simple duplex. Now, we did pass a law a year ago that allows for kind of a mother-in-law suite, what we call it accessory dwelling units. So you could have 2 units on a site, but they would not be equal. One would be sort of subordinate to the other. The idea of just doing 2 apartments stacked or side by side is not allowed in most of the city. This is just a gallery of examples from across the city of the range of small scale density that is very identifiable with the city. Most of these would not be allowed to be built today. So we want to get back to a place where just kind of common sense, small scale housing is allowed. That's a big theme in this housing chapter. Functional city covers transportation, community facilities, arts and culture. I want to just acknowledge that I mentioned at the beginning, arts and culture is a chapter that we haven't done before. We're talking about it as functional because it really shouldn't be a luxury. We shouldn't be saying, well, when the economy is bad, we can't do arts and culture. It has to really be part of the city's DNA, and we have to fund it, and we have to treat it as something that's contributing to our city economically as well. So in transportation, one of the big themes is that we're transitioning our mobility options pretty significantly today. We're providing more and more ways to get around, make it easier. And this quote I found from San Francisco's Transit Authority director is really important, because it just kind of acknowledges that the investments we make in transportation can have a huge return on investment, not just about getting around, but the quality of our environment, economic investment, health. We can really change the way we live by having a better mobility system in the city that is not as one-dimensional, where today it's very hard to get around without a personal vehicle. Tomorrow, in the future, we want to be able to make it easier and safer for more and more people to be able to get out of their cars if they feel comfortable doing that. This map on the right shows the concentration of traffic crashes from 2015 to 2021. You can see the trend, major corridors. We can design these corridors to be much, much safer, and that's a big theme in this chapter. We did a really fine-grained analysis of our pedestrian network using a tool that was developed by our regional planning organization, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. We tested it out here in Annapolis and used it to create this map that shows all of the gaps in our pedestrian network that we can focus on in the coming years. Our bike network as well has been updated. We did a master plan in 2021 that we've kind of advanced, and you can see in red our priority corridors that we're focusing on. We've gotten historic amounts of federal and state funding for these projects. They take a while to implement. They always involve adjacent property owners and community input, but I would say funding them has been a real blessing. Be able to move these projects forward where we haven't been able to do that in the past, just solely based on city funding. We're able to move these things forward, and they're going to have a real impact on people being able to get around safely. And then finally, electric mobility is a big theme that is going to become even more prolific in the future. I mean, just the new garage, Hellman Garage that opened recently, you'll see a range of electric features, from charging stations to electric photovoltaic panels on the roof that power the garage. And these types of priorities are going to become central to our transportation policy. Community facilities is a big, broad chapter, but a lot of it is focused on parks and open space. We're highlighting the Elktonia Cars Beach project here, which was a historic conservation initiative off of Edgewood Road that preserves the last remaining piece of what was a major Black-owned beach resort destination that was the host to a who's who of significant R&B performers from 30s through the 70s. And so that's a major achievement to preserve that property. It'll be our first major beach front park in the city, and it'll connect to Ellen Moyer Park on Back Creek. We did an analysis of our park network in relation to social vulnerability. I won't go into all the details here, but we really want to understand who has access to parks and who doesn't, and where can we invest better in the city based on parks of different sizes. And we have a big focus on water access. This is a big theme of this chapter. We have probably 6 to 8 pages just focused on water access alone. We are in the midst of still doing our public water access plan. A lot of the recommendations are already kind of known to us and are part of this, incorporated into this chapter, but this plan simply maps the water access points we know of today with the social vulnerability information to understand where the gaps are. And then we talk about schools. The city doesn't manage the school system, the county does, but we can be much more strategic about the investments we make around the schools. This shows the walk radius for kids who are walking to school. These are places where we should have connected sidewalk networks, bike networks, and this is something that we can use to steer our investments in our roadways. We have information in this plan about our strategies towards public safety. This has not historically been something that comprehensive plans address. Police has always been sort of a separate topic. You can talk to our police chief and he'll probably be the first one to tell you that it has to be comprehensive in thinking about how to improve public safety. It can't just be about policing. We have to invest in communities in a way that makes them safer. And so we try to provide recommendations in this plan that can help to augment our approach to public safety and acknowledge some of the things that Annapolis Police Department is already doing, such as their mapping initiatives and their community interventions, but showing the data for where the crime is happening, both violent crime and property crime, I think is important. The arts and culture chapter, a big emphasis is on shifting the way we think about the cultural narratives of the city and being much more inclusive. This exhibit from the relatively new Museum of Historic Annapolis at the foot of Main Street is kind of the perfect example of showing how that more inclusive thinking about preservation and the cultural landscape of the city has gained a lot more visibility, I would say, in the last few years. And it shows in our chapter the way we want to invest in preservation and culture in the city is looking at places that have been either overlooked or underinvested. You can see on the upper right, the former home of Hoppy Adams, the important radio disc jockey and civil rights leader, host of all the concerts at Carr's Beach. You can see the Waterman's Cottage, Burtis House, the Masonic Lodge on Clay Street, the Maynard Burgess House in the upper left, right across from City Hall, that's about to be completed. And then, of course, the Bryce House in the bottom. I mean, it's not to say that the historic district of downtown is not still a central focus. I mean, there's a huge emphasis on that as well, but we're trying to broaden our focus. And so we do include some specific preservation focus areas, particularly parole. Existing conditions related to environmental sustainability. Climate change is not surprisingly the biggest theme in this chapter. Climate vulnerability. We really go into every detail of how the city is being impacted by climate change and what we can do to protect ourselves better and adapt better to changing conditions. You can see bottom left here, extreme temperatures, extreme precipitation, sea level rise, coastal storms. All of these are climate change induced. And a lot is already happening, of course. Our city dock project is probably the most visible effort, but there's projects happening in other parts of the city as well. And we spent a lot on urban tree canopy because when you look at the benefits of tree canopy, they really address all the themes we're trying to meet in this comprehensive plan. The equity, the health, resilience, all of that can be accommodated by improved, preserved, enhanced tree canopy. On the right, you can see where we're losing tree canopy based on the most recent data we have. And we're losing it primarily in our residential areas. There's a lot more we can do to enhance our tree canopy, expand it. It requires resources, and there's a lot of recommendations in this comprehensive plan aimed at putting ourselves in a better position to expand our tree canopy and attack that goal with more ambition. And then finally, it's mentioned that expanding our tree canopy, one of the areas that we want to do that is along our creeks. The riparian areas essentially are places where we should have thriving banks, tree canopy, vegetation, and so it's very much related to this water resources chapter. But water resources chapter is looking at both water as a resource for the way we live in the city, our quality of life, but it's also the hard infrastructure, moving drinking water, wastewater through the city. And so we've pulled information from other plans that our Department of Public Works uses to assess our infrastructure, our underground infrastructure, and we wanted to have key information available to folks who read this comprehensive plan to know, well, this is what we're focusing on to ensure that we continue to deliver excellent service in regard to water resources. So you'll find a lot of information about our infrastructure in this chapter. That is the conclusion of the overview of the comprehensive plan. As you can tell, it is you will probably learn a lot about the city you live in by reading this comprehensive plan. It goes into great detail about just about anything you can think of, and it's structured in hopefully a clear way. At this point, we just want to open it up for questions and see if anybody has chimed in. I know Casey is going to kind of moderate and see if we have anything. And if we don't, we'll hope for questions next week when we do this again.
So we got a question from Karen Jennings around the future land use and zoning area. So she asked the question, is the planning and zoning department going to be the ones to decide if a development fits any new design zoning guidance, or will it be the planning commission or neighborhood groups like the ECA's architecture committee? I think this specifically had to do with generally the mixed use area of the presentation.
Yeah. So today, the way our zoning and development process works today, it is very much a, I would say it's a process where the zoning code does not provide a great amount of guidance in many parts of the city for what a development should look like. It might set some basic parameters such as setbacks from the street or from adjacent properties, or maximum height or density, but doesn't really provide guidance on the specifics of the architecture. And then so what happens is development comes in at one end of the spectrum of what it might look like, and the community might have a completely different perception or expectation. At the other end of the spectrum, city planning staff then have to moderate and try to kind of come to some sort of compromise solution, development that hopefully meets everybody's expectations. The idea with the form-based code is that we would develop guidelines in partnership or in collaboration with communities that are based on existing context today, and that those guidelines then help to make the process more efficient moving forward, and essentially a little more prescriptive of what we might expect to see. So that process of creating the form-based code is going to be very rigorous and involve a lot of community input. And I've been looking at examples from other places and how they've done it, but that's the idea. So, I mean, the community is still going to be very involved. And even once we were to have a form-based code, project would still go through the same planning commission. I mean, a certain type of project has to be over a threshold of certain number of a certain amount of change to its site to just getting into the details here. But not every project goes to planning commission. The major projects do, the ones that are probably most consequential. That's not going to change. But the community is going to stay very involved in this process as well. So.
Would you say for the most part that there would be a combination of the three that she mentions, whether, as you said, if a development is big enough that the planning commission, a neighborhood group, and planning zoning would all be involved at something like that, but for the most part, it would just depend on the situation, and there would just be a combination of whether it's all three or just at an architectural level, potentially just a neighborhood and planning zoning collaborating on new design zoning guidance for a project.
Yeah, I guess those three kind of major contributing elements, the owner, the developer, property owner, the city staff, I guess it's maybe four, planning commission, then community resident, they're all going to continue being active participants in the process. The idea is just to try to start off from a point of more agreement, I guess, in terms of what's appropriate. That's the big, what we would want, and it's sort of a big change.
I hope that answers your question, Karen. That was the only question we received during the presentation.
Okay.
And if anything else comes in, I think our emails were posted on the presentation. If anything comes up after, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, we know this is the first presentation we're doing. We're going to be putting the recording of this on the website so people can refer to it if they'd like. I hope to get more questions next week when we do this presentation again, and try to make my comments a little more efficient in talking about the comprehensive plan. But I think with that, we're at 7:15. I think we started around 6:15. So I think with no further questions, we'll close out the presentation and just thank anybody who has been watching, whether through YouTube or some other channel, and hope you'll get engaged in this process by reviewing the draft comprehensive plan and submitting any comments you might have, or coming to one of our upcoming events, or simply reaching out to us if you have a question. And I'd say particularly folks who are involved in communities across the city and want us to come to you, we are more than happy to do that. So thank you again, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.